It's just 2 days before Passover. Jesus is in Jerusalem, coming into the temple every day to teach the people. Having claimed the temple is my Father's house, it is my house. They had made it a den of thieves. He was seeking to reclaim it as a place of God. But the authorities, the chief priests, the scribes, the rulers of the people, had determined for quite some time that they wanted to be rid of Jesus. He was not part of the establishment, therefore his actions were treasonous against them, and they needed to be rid of him. The problem was that Jesus was very popular with the people, and they didn't want to lose their standing in the process. All they needed to do was to discredit Jesus in a major way. They had challenged him in Luke chapter 20 about his authority, but he pointed out that they hadn't challenged John the Baptist concerning his authority. The people recognized he was a prophet, and John the Baptist had pointed to him. But he had warned them in a parable that the kingdom was about to be taken away from them because they had not rendered to God the things that they should have. There's a whole issue of how you render to God the things that are God's and render to man the things that are man's. The rulers had got it wrong. We continue the reading in verse 20 of chapter 20. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be righteous, that they might seize him on his words, in order to deliver him to the power and the authority of the governor. Then they asked him, saying, Teacher, we know that you say and teach rightly, and you do not show personal favoritism, but teach the way of God in truth. Is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, Why do you test me? Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription does it have? They answered and said, Caesar's. And he said to them, Well, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. But they could not catch him in his words in the presence of the people, and they marvelled at his answer, and kept silent. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we examine Jesus' response to a perpetual problem, the issue of priorities. We live in this world. We have obligations in this world. But we are children of God, and we have obligations to God. Sometimes these things are in conflict. Sometimes we imagine there's a conflict when there is not. And sometimes we'll try and use religious arguments to avoid civic responsibilities. Among the Jewish people, there had been a strong argument and division, a political division, between whether they people should pay taxes to Caesar or not. There were those who were happy to pay taxes to Caesar, and there were those who were saying, but we are God's people. We shouldn't be honouring anybody but God. The first commandment says that you worship God only. Surely paying taxes to Caesar is worshipping Caesar. This was a question that had been unresolved, and so it was a prime target, because whichever way Jesus jumped on this one, there would be some in the crowd who would side with one view and some that would side with the other. And so the crowd would be divided, and so they could break his power. But their purpose was that they might deliver him to the power and the authority of the governor. They expected him to say, we should not pay taxes to Caesar. And when he said that, then he could be handed over to the governor, who would quickly execute him for not honouring the government and raising up opposition to the Roman government. The Roman government was very careful to maintain its authority. That's why they had soldiers everywhere. That's why they had a governor in Jerusalem. But these people came, their purpose was to trap Jesus. So they pretended to be innocent, righteous men who were grappling with a problem. And so they begin with flattery. When somebody comes to you with flattery, then be wary of what they're saying. because if you're distracted by the flattery, you might be trapped. Their flattery was, "Teacher." They honoured him as a teacher. "We know that you say and teach rightly. We've come to you because we've realised that you have the right answers, and that you do not show personal favouritism but teach the way of God in truth." This was an incredible characteristic of Jesus' ministry. He talked to the sinners as well as to the Pharisees, to the rich and to the poor, to the healthy and to the sick. There was no personal favouritism. Whoever would respond to him, he would receive. And of course, he was a teacher, teaching the way of God in truth. So the question was, is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And the argument being that Caesar is not God. He's usurped the place of God. He claims to be a God. He wants to be worshipped. Should we not resist him? The teaching that the apostles brought later to the church was that all governing authorities are appointed by God. They should be recognized and given honor. Give honor to whom honor is due. We even recognize, and Jesus himself recognized, that Satan is the prince of this world. He has been given an administrative authority in the heavenly places, but he is not using that authority correctly. Nevertheless, the Lord has not yet removed him from office, and he continues to challenge people concerning God, just as he is seeking to challenge Jesus at this particular point in time through these duplicitous men. So we know that God has appointed governments and we are to pay our taxes. But this was before this matter was resolved in the Christian church, and so it was a matter to be resolved before Jesus. But Jesus can't be tricked. He knows their craftiness. He perceives that this is not an honest question, it's a trick question. And so he says, "Well, why are you testing me?" And the implication is, this is a pretty obvious answer. So why do you bring such a simple question to me? Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription does it have? Well, the denarius, Roman currency, Roman coins, had Caesar's image on it. And so he says, "Well, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." Such a simple answer to a question that had puzzled many people for a long time. God has appointed governors, and we are to respect them. And they have authority to create currency. They want you to pay their taxes in their currency. It's part of the world system. Of course you pay taxes. In fact, it was a Hebrew patriarch, Joseph, who established this system in Egypt. It's the obligation you have for being in the world. Are you going to live without money? If you're not going to live without money, then you need to pay your taxes. But the thing that God requires is not so much money. He receives the poor. He doesn't require money. He desires a true heart, sincerity. He desires love, love of God which flows through into love for people. This is where Jesus had come foul of the Pharisees already. They loved money. They trusted in their own righteousness. And he would say that money does not represent God's blessing upon you. It's a worldly thing. You should give it away and get treasure in heaven. You need to give alms, not just pay your tithe. You need to lead people in righteousness and help them live a righteous life, not just tell them the standard and leave them to fail. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. We have a job to do in this world. We have a part to play in this world, and we should do it with all of our energy. And render to God the things that are God's. They couldn't catch him in his words. They indeed marvelled at his answer, for this question meant that Jesus was raised in the standing of the people. They hadn't succeeded in dividing the people against Jesus. They could not catch him in his words in the presence of the people.